Yeah. Huh? No. Just got to pay extra close attention. You should be able to manage without your book if you take notes. But you can't go back to class if they're totally in the middle. Then I'm the one that gets in trouble. So what are you letting those kids come back for? Okay. When we talk about comparing and ordering fractions, we need to, well, an example is going to look like this. They're going to say 5/6 is what compared to 3/4? Is 5/6 greater than 3/4? Is it less than 3/4? Is it equal to 3/4? And it's kind of hard to tell right now unless you have a really good knowledge of fractions and their values. There's really one way to know for sure, and that is if I get them to have the same denominator. So I have 5/6, I have 3/4. What could I use as their common denominator? Cheyenne. 24. Is there anything smaller than 24 that I could use? 12. So now I say, okay, for my bottom number, for me to get from a 6 to a 12, what do I have to do with the 6? Multiply by 2. So multiply the 5 times 2, get a 10. 4 times what is 12? So 3 times 3? So how does 10/12 compare with 9/12? 10/12 is greater than 9/12, which means 5/6 is greater than 3/4. Some of you looked at the 6 and the 4 and immediately said 24. What happens if I use 24? Let's find out. 6 times what is 24? 4. 4 times 5? 20. 4 times what is 24? 6. 6 times 3? Do we still get greater than? Okay. It still works because it is a common, what do we call that? Multiple. Awesome, yes. Common multiple. I can use any common multiple I want as long as it's a common multiple. So whether I chose 12, whether I chose 24, whatever works best. However, I will say it's going to be better off in the long run if you pick the lowest, if you pick the least common multiple. Because this is leading right into doing what? Pretty soon, what else are you going to have to make sure that you have common denominators before you do with fractions? What operations? Not dividing, not multiplying, adding and subtracting. We get it sooner or later. So adding and subtracting. That's when you want to make sure you use the lowest, because the smaller numbers you're working with, the easier you'll make it for yourself. Okay, but it'll work either way. So let's try a couple. You want to see one more? You want to get working on trying this. 6/8, how does it compare to a 7/9? And while you're at it, do a 6/10. How does that compare to a 9/15? Give it a shot. 6/8, 7/9. Common denominator. Which one? 72. So 8 times 1 is 72. So 9 times 6 times 8 times 8. Therefore, less than. 6/8 is less than. Okay. 6/10, 9/15. 30. How do you tell it was 30 so fast? If I'm choosing between, when I look at my denominators, a 10 and a 15, go with the bigger one. Count up the multiples from the bigger one. So the next multiple of 15 is 30. Does 30 also work for 10? Don't go with the smaller one. Go with the bigger one. Count up the multiples from there. Times 3, 18. Times 2, 18. Therefore, now I'm going to show you something else, which is also an option for you. As you look at some of these fractions, as you look at 6 over 10, 9 over 15, the first thing that should come to your mind is that, wow, those fractions could be simplified. What happens if you simplify a 6 over 10? What happens if you simplify a 9/15? You could have found out right away that they were equal. Okay, so it's kind of a shortcut, but it's also number sense. Okay, options. How have you got them both? Ordering works the same way. Oh, let's work with a couple of mixed numbers. 4 2/5, 4 3/7. One thing I look at first, the big number, the whole number, because if those are different, then it's easy. It's just comparing whole numbers. It doesn't matter what the fraction is. So they're the same. So let's move on to the fraction. Between a 7 and a 5, let's go with 35. Times 7 is 14, times 5, which is 15. Therefore, the 3/7 is larger than the 2/5. But they will sometimes fool you. They'd have like a 1 7/8. How does that compare to a 2 and 1/9? And people go through and they'll go through all the trouble getting the denominators the same when it's totally unnecessary. Why? Because one's a 1 and one's a 2. The 2 is always going to be bigger than the 1 when it's the whole number, right? So make sure you're paying close attention to that. Ordering fractions. So let's take a look at some 2/3, 5/6, 3/4. They want us to order these from least to greatest. So what we'll need to do is convert all three fractions to have the same denominator, and someone is yelling out 12. 12 works for all three. That's okay. Again, you know, you could use 12. You could probably use 24. But 12 works best for right now. Times 4 is 8. Times 2 is 10. Times 3 is 9. Now, very important. Now that I know what their values are when 12 is the denominator, when I order them, I need to order them back in their original regular form. So the 8/12 was the smallest. That happens to be my 2/3, followed by the 9/12, which happened to be my 3/4, and then finally the 5/6. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Be the same thing. You'd still look at the mix. You'd look at the big number first. Otherwise, you just order the mixed numbers. You'd order the fractions after if the whole numbers are the same. Here's one to try. 5/8, 3/4, 1/2. Use what's our common? 8. 8 works just fine. So 5/8 times 2 is 6/8, and that would be 4/8. So therefore, our smallest, half, followed by the 5/8, which is the 5/8, and then the 6/8, which is the 3/4. All right, let's try one with a mixed number, then we should begin. Okay, so let's carry down the whole numbers, just so we don't forget them. So Brandon, for the 3 of them, we said we were going to go with 60. So 12 times 5 is 60, 7 times 5 is 3 times 20, 2 times 20, and then 5 times 12, 1 times 12. Therefore, putting them back in their original, the 12/60th looks like to be the smallest, followed by the 35, which is the 6 and 7/12, followed by the 6 and... Okay, now here's something I want you to also take into consideration when you look at these fractions. There's one common fraction that you should all be familiar with besides like 0 and 1, and that one comes right in the middle of 0 and 1. Half. How does 7/12 compare to half? Is it more than half? By a lot or by a little? By a little. Because 6/12 is going to give you exactly half. 1/5, under half, right? So you're comparing those two. The 2/3, do you know what 2/3 is as a decimal? 0.6 repeating. So it's like 0.66, 0.67. Okay? So there's a good chance that you know already that that one's going to be greater. Because 67%, is that just a little over half? So it doesn't work too well for using that as your primary means of putting them in order, but it's a good way to check and make sure that it makes sense. Okay. You have 3-7. We might be... We still on the blues? It is a blue. So numbers 1 through 16, compare each pair of numbers using less than, equal to, or greater than. Beware of the mixed numbers, like number 1. You look at number 1, 2 and 14/17, and 1 and 16/17. It's greater than because why? 2 is greater than 1. Okay, so don't forget to look at the whole numbers first. You may save yourself some work. Okay? 17 through 25, least to greatest. Original form. Maybe you want to put down original form for 17 through 25. Okay, original form. 26 to 34 says use mental math to compare each fractions. Yeah, do that. I'll make a deal. I will not, if you promise to use mental math. What is mental math? Do it in your head. You promise that you're going to do those in your head, I won't count those for right or wrong. I want you to experiment with it. See if you can tell by looking at them, reasoning through them, which ones are larger, smaller, maybe equal. Okay, we'll still correct it, but it won't be part of your score. It's still expected that you do it. Okay? And then 35, why don't you put a star by 35? Give it 35 as extra credit. Really not that much more difficult. Actually, it's asking you to do the same thing that you would be doing for 17 to 25. Same thing. Okay?